G'day, I'm Ash, welcome yourselves back to the channel, and this time I should say bi-yearly tradition of doing a top 10 list, and particularly with my hated vehicles. This list is in no particular order, but if you want to see my previous ones, they're all linked in the description down below. And while we're there, 3% off anything in War Thunder, also in the description down below, and get the fantastic Ash decal. Anyway, number 1 on the list is the Cheeto. I was going to say the Cheeto, but that's a different vehicle altogether. I don't like this vehicle because it's rather chunky. Its mobility is rather lacking, especially in stock configuration, although it's mainly just because it's an odd-looking vehicle that I dislike this machine. Primarily because the 37 doesn't really do much, although it's kind of lackluster, the secondary, and despite it being one of the first autoloaders in game, it really does just add to an era of old frustration for vehicles that are better than it. Jumbo Shermans are particularly really good. You face stuff like T-34-85s as well, and comparatively those machines are better, and the armor isn't exactly the best thing out there. And, you know, that's why I kind of dislike this machine. Number 2 on the list is a fan favourite. This is the Doom Turtle, one of the slowest vehicles and most annoying vehicles to play in the game. 105mm gun is okay. The APCR really doesn't do this gun enough justice, and mobility, well, you're looking at something that it's not desirable. The 50 caliber is probably the only thing on this list, especially with the Commander's 50 caliber, that's really worthwhile actually using. But aside from that, this T95 is, well, the Turtle. It's 305mm on the front, 152 on the side, and the back's 50. This thing, especially when it comes to getting attacked by aircraft, is just a moving pillbox, basically. I just dislike playing this machine at all costs. I'd rather play the Ag Tiger, ironically, but again, that's just why I dislike this machine, particularly. Slow and cumbersome. Speaking of things that are slow and cumbersome, number 3 on the list is the Archer. Basically, this vehicle is basically backwards, right? It's really hard to master this vehicle, as the gun doesn't face forward, instead it's on a Valentine chassis that... anyway, it's just a horrible tank destroyer. It has a long reload for its battle rating. Despite the 17-pounder being fantastic, it still only shoots a solid shot. If vehicle mobilization can occur quite often, you can get yourself stuck in between a rock and a hard place quite often as well. And 4 kilometers reverse is really why I dislike this vehicle primarily. And obviously, you know, lightly armored tanks, you know, can easily kill you, and it's very, very easy to kill with an aircraft. And while it is good in a defensive position where the enemy is coming towards you, if you're trying to advance an enemy or you're having a close quarters sort of battle, it really does suffer, and I just dislike this machine at all costs. Speaking of machines I have a hate for, this is number 4, the Italian-Hungarian Zirani 1. Essentially, it's a tank destroyer with basically no armor, and, well, it's paper thin and has rockets that explode on contact with any type of surface. What you get here is, well, limited vertical guidance, a very low-profile vehicle that, yes, is fast, but with only 75mm of a flat frontal protection, the armor is basically generally ineffective at all engagements, and this thing is really a struggle bus. No machine guns, lack of turret, and it lacks an APCR shell, and the rockets are incredibly difficult to use. They don't have a great deal of traverse, so launching them before, well, right after you spawn is really ideal for this machine. And, well, I don't hate Battle Pass vehicles, but this is one of the vehicles that I absolutely hated driving back when it first came out. Now, the next vehicle, there wasn't anything inherently wrong with this particular vehicle. In fact, it's probably one of the best performing vehicles in the game. This is the Swedish T80. And yeah, it's the Swedish T80. What you get is a squadron reward vehicle introduced in the last major update with a battle rating of 10.7, and what it stands for is basically more blatant copy and paste across the board. I get Sweden did test them, but how else do you put a vehicle like this in a tech tree, considering they only tested them? Does that mean that Sweden's also going to get a King Tiger as well, because they tested one of those? It adds up to a lot of questions. I dislike this vehicle because, well, it represents just a lazy copy and paste effort by Guardian Entertainment, and yeah, okay, that point can be argued as to what is unique and what isn't. This vehicle is perfectly fine. There is no arbitrary, conclusion to its chapter, but, well, Australia used Leopards for a while. We also used Challengers. Are we going to see those in the British tech tree? Of course, that's an off-case example, but point stands. Anyway, speaking of vehicles that I despise with a passion, the PT-76-57. This Russian monstrosity just ruined the game when it first came out in the Battle Pass. It was blatantly broken, and broken because the auto reloader on this thing is incredibly neat. The 57mm reloads like nobody's business, and I dislike it because it just has a tendency to break the game's matchmaker. And, well, now it's not necessarily something you see too often, although there are still a couple of them floating around. They're not as prevalent as the next vehicle, which we'll talk about shortly. This is sort of a combined case. So, this vehicle is amphibious. It does get ESS, it gets scouting and artillery, and it also gets smoke. It's incredibly potent and reloads incredibly quickly, and has a stabilizer as well. And as you unlock the shells later down the line, it becomes more and more powerful and can also destroy aircraft with a fuse shell. So, it's light, easy, mobile, and does everything you possibly want. And it's like the 2S238, which I'm showing off here, being that this thing is completely utterly bonkers. It was something that broke a whole entire BR bracket. That's why both of these vehicles are on my hated list. Specifically the 2S238, because it didn't come to the dev server when the rest of the content was just a finished subtree. Instead, they decided to spring this vehicle on the whole entire community, and within a few hours people had realised, hang on, this $9,000 Golden Eagle Premium was just utterly tearing arse and ruining matches. So I dislike this vehicle, despite playing it, despite owning it. It's really frustrating to use. It has everything, including a drone and a dozer, and everything you could possibly want out of a vehicle. And despite its sort of butter rating of 9.7, it really should probably be about 10.3. It is what it is. Unlike the last two vehicles, this light tank is a French one, and it has an American turret on the top. This is the AMX-13 M24. At number 8, this is a premium rank 2 battle running 3.7, which does everything fantastically well. It is a good vehicle, and it is fantastic at what it does. It even gets a low-speed stabilizer. It goes plenty fast. There's 50 calibers for days, but it's ugly as fuck. And you can't really design a tank and merge two tank turrets like that and not call this thing ugly. The AMX-13 chassis is perfectly adequate for this job. The turret traverse on the chassis and the way that it's mounted is perfectly adequate. I just hate the way that this looks. It's an ugly duckling. It's not as ugly as most French vehicles, but it is one of my ugliest looking things that I've played recently, at least this year alone. And it's just god-awful looking. So yeah, that's why I hate this vehicle. Now the next vehicle on the list is one of the fan favourites. This is the Sturm Tiger. You're probably like, no, a derp tank, that's fun. And yes, while this thing is good fun to shoot and sometimes to play, it is really just a turkey when it comes to general usability. It's on a Tiger chassis, so it's not exactly the greatest, it's not exactly the fastest. It is a big target, it's a chonky boy, and you can basically just machine gun the barrel and essentially, explode the ammunition inside the barrel while it's loading. So that isn't really that good while you're playing this machine. It is satisfying getting a kill with it, but there really isn't any other reason for this vehicle to exist outside of the fact that they brought it in specifically for the 10th anniversary of War Thunder. And even for that, I don't really think it should have just been released as a general vehicle anyway. It's just I just fucking hate it. It's good fun, but fuck. Speaking of fucking things that ruin the game, this is the WMA 301. It is China's battle rating 8.3, 8,000 G armoured car, and it is possibly one of the most brutal vehicles I have seen. At 8.3, it has 3 different ammo racks and a capability to do a huge amount of things. It does have an abysmal reverse speed. It is quite tall. The default shells are to be desired, and most times you can't really get what you want out of it. But for what it has, it gets a scout, it gets artillery, it gets everything you want. The drones, ATGMs, You know, it was smoke grenades and a really good gun and a really good machine gun as well, plus night vision and thermals. At 8.3, this thing is incredibly powerful. And I've seen people get 11, 12 kills in a match in this particular machine, and yeah, it's probably one of the best Chinese vehicles in the game just because of the firepower and mobility that this thing offers. And I just hate it. It's on the list because it breaks 8.3. Stay tuned for our every 2-year aircraft top 10 hated list as well. That will be coming out shortly. As for whether you agree with this video or not, let me know in the comments down below. And what are your top 10 hated vehicles of 2022? Can be anything in game. Why do you hate it? Why? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Thank you to everyone who's bought my decal. Bye bye.